Gentlemen, we're here today to discuss this Palomar Boomer 600. Boomer 600. Okay. Let's read the nociones. This comes from one of my local guys. Worked fine, shooting skip in the truck one day. Then after power off, radio and kicker, I returned to the truck several hours later and the entire unit was so hot to the touch, I couldn't even touch it. With the power off. We're going to get to that. Disconnected it from the battery, waited for it to cool down, opened it up, and seen what may have been fried. But only noticed the attached resistor was detached completely from the board and was floating around on the inside. Many thanks for the repair and or optimize or whatever you feel you need to do to provide better performance. Also, if you can, confirm to me what the max PEPTX be for this B600 would be great. Appreciated. 73s. Okay, we've seen this before. Usually, what causes this is the relay gets stuck. I have a feeling that's not the case with this amplifier. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is that the on-off switch does not do anything. Does not now, nor would it ever do anything to actually physically break the electrical circuital pattern of pixies going in and out through the amplifier. All that on-off switch does is controls the voltage that goes, or the current that goes to the relay. You turn the relay on and off and control the lights on the front. There is no fuse and there's no disconnect circuitry between the transistors. Everything is hot in here all the time. So it only takes one little thing to go wrong and you have, well, Hiroshima. Or I guess it'd be Chernobyl. It gets hot and melts down and goes all the way down to the core of the earth. When somebody says to me they've shut the amplifier off, this here, I immediately assume that there's a problem either with the biasing circuit, the key circuit, or one of the transistors. I have a feeling. I just have a feeling. After sitting here staring at this a long time, I noticed we have a 10 ohmer here that's completely different than the other three, and the other three look like they were put in there by a blind man that was trying to figure out which way he needed it. None of this is right. So this tells me, and I know for a fact that these amplifiers were built with Toshibas. They just were. This particular model and style of amplifier was built before the HG. This thing's been burnt up a couple times, is what I'm getting at. Now the Chinese transistors have a bad, we see this. I see this from time to time. What'll happen is the transistor doesn't blow all the way open, but what it does do is it'll short and it'll ground itself from this tab to ground. From here to ground. But it's at a very high resistance, so it's not enough to actually cause smoke or flame or the 10 ohmer to go up, but we'll say from here to here. Also, as I'm looking at this, I can't help but notice that this lid is cocked up higher than the rest. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at our volt amp gauge. I don't even need to have coax hooked up to this. I was going to key it up, but pretty good feeling I've already figured out what's going on. Let's slide you down. This is our clamp over fluke amp ring. It's a bit more sensitive than this guy here. So let's go ahead. So we have a solid 2 amps being pulled all the time. Amplifier is in the off position. None of the lights in the front are on, the preamp's not on, none of that stuff. We're just sitting here making heat someplace, which is awesome because then that tells us where we need to go look. That is one transistor. And it is wide open. Look at that. 142 degrees. That 142 degrees is going to get transferred to the heatsink. So the amplifier's off, but we're making heat. I can feel it with my hands. We're pulling 2.2 amps worth of shmoo right now. I don't need to key this up. I know there's a problem, right? If I just go and I key it up, that transistor's going to go the rest of the way open and probably tear up some other shit as it goes along. It might take and dump 12 volt directly back here on the input transformer and wipe out that transistor. Make sense? If this thing shorts, it can bounce voltage back through it and wipe this transistor out. And the way this circuit is set up, there's a trace that goes from here to here. So in technical terms, in theory, theoretical, thermomechanical, a 12 volt leak back through this component and wipe out all 4 transistors. So now look at this. As it heats up, the current load's starting to drop off. So where's our transistor at temperature-wise now? 142. Moral of the story is something's gone wrong underneath this lid. Well, let me call my local guy and tell him what I found. He wants me to upgrade it, and you know, the huge. The other thing I want to point out is there's a rule that we have to follow. This rule is a little flexible, but not a lot. The rule that we have is each transistor pulls roughly 25 amps worth of current. So 25 plus 25 plus 25 plus 25 plus 25. Now how this works out is actually this works out to be about 18. And each one of these is about 24. But it's easier to do the math at 25. So we're going to think about this smartly. And we're going to go 25 plus 25 is 50. 50 plus 25 is 75. 75 plus 25 is 100. And then 100 plus another 25 is say it with me, 125. Why on God's green earth will we expect to pass 125 amps worth of possible potential output shmoo through a 50 amp Anderson clip? Please note the clip wasn't provided. They took that off for some reason. I don't know why, but just food for thought. The other thing we have to think about is we have a fan that looks like it's been shoe-gooed under the heatsink. That's okay. I'm not afraid of that technology, nor should anybody else be. It's not really the best way to do things, but what does scare me is this here. This is like the guy that when he does his own home installation on his car stereo setup, and he takes a piece of 4 gauge without a fuse and goes directly off the battery and then runs it through the door. So take him right up underneath the hood and along the hood and then through the door and then down and over. I see more cars burnt to the ground from that. We basically have the same thing going on here. We've taken the fan wire and we've just pinched it between the back plate and the heatsink. The nice thing is they curled up the extra wire here for us and then shoe-gooed it in place. So maybe, just maybe, as I'm doing the power wire modifications, I can drill another hole and use this thing called a grommet. And we'll go from the back here with the grommet. And then we'll bring that around to the on-off switch, and then we'll put this thing called an RF choke. And we'll get rid of this electrical tape BS. And you want to make these leads as short as possible on the inside of the amp. So we'll get this fixed up. We'll do a power wire bus distribution upgrade. When I was a kid, I used to do these because these were cheap. These were truck stop amplifiers, man. You could, us, back in the day when we were selling these things at the truck stop, this is like a $150 amplifier, right? I guess its equivalent today would be like an RM Italy, right? We'd take $1,000. We'd buy 10 amplifiers. There'd be a Palomar 225s, or, you know, $1,000 would get you basically 10 amps. We get 10 amps, and then we'd turn around and we'd triple our money, right? So we'd take that $2,000 and we buy 20 amps. and then we triple our money again. Meanwhile, we take that other $1,000, cut that in half, and split it. That make sense? Well, that was great. Why that deal lasted, we were getting that from, I think, A1 Telecom, I think, or Barjan or something like that back in the day. Yeah, I don't know where they were getting them for that cheap. They were. Just the deal. This amp was never designed to even be repaired. This is one of these things that when it went shits up, you were supposed to throw it in the trash can. But here we are today. It's not in that bad a shape. It's really not. And I'm talking when I was like 16 years old working at the CB shop. So that would have been over 30 years ago now, right? All right, let me call the local guy. And, dude, me pulling on that just that hard broke the wires out of the fan control. Fucking hot. All right, let me call my local guy. So let's just say, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I had to rebuild these for a guy, one of these for a guy, and the thing kept popping pills. And so ever since then, I've made it a point that when I work on one of these, I slide it out of the case and I take a quick look at it. This is our transistor that's in question. Let's see if you guys can see what the problem is. You see how all these transistors hang down and they touch the board? What's going on here? Yeah, this transistor is cockeyed and was not making good contact with the heatsink, which is probably what caused most of our problems. Anyhow, the reason that I like to come and look at the bottom side of the board are these two connections right here. If you notice, they're an angel pubic hair away from making contact with the inside of the case down here. I don't know what they used for thermal compound, but yeah. There's nothing major underneath the transistor. It was keeping it from sitting flat. The screws weren't tight, I'll say that. There's no high edges on anything. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to clean this up, clean this heatsink out. We're going to clean this up. We're going to resolder this stuff. And we're going to pull this pill out. We're going to pull the top off and see if we can see any damage to it. So in the process of just wiping this down with an alcohol-soaked rag, our output wire for our transformer popped off. So I'm really quite grateful that I didn't slam line this and just assume. I went ahead and I cleaned this out, got this all ready, and I chamfed the holes. I sat there with my anti-burr tool and I just cupped out the holes on the heatsink, just cause. Make me feel better about things. Let's flow some new solder into here. There we go, there's one. Jesus, the longer I look, the worse this gets. All right. Okay, so let's grab the old El Dento pick here. Do-do-do-do. Wow, I didn't even solder that leg, and it just fell off. God, who put this together for you, dude? The soldering iron never touched this tab. Okay, whatever. Whatever. Typical. I know who was in here last, and you can tell. You just listen. Let's say that I've been here and done this in this town for better part of a decade or better, and you learn who's got solder skills and who don't. And the ones that got solder skills, you figure out what kind of solder skills they have, right? I'm not saying that I walk on water or nothing when it comes to this, but I do have a fucking soldering iron tattooed on the side of my arm, so just saying. Let's just grab all of these 10 ohmers out of here. That's pathetic. I mean, it's technically the right resistance. It's technically a lot of things, but not right. Let's go ahead and lift on this a little bit. Peel that up, peel this up. All right, so now set these over here. Wow, that's warm. Okay. This is kind of cool. So a lot of people don't ever think about this, but these two caps, there's a cap here and then one over here that are right behind the positive distribution pole. This is how you do your transformer tuning. They've got a 560 on both sides of this thing. And then on the front, they've got 100, or pardon me, 560s. Man, what the shit? Look at this. That's a 560 and it should be 100. This one's not even soldered down. Just look at this. This is not soldered down and that's the wrong value cap. This should be 100. Got 300s on the input. What? Wow. So much wrong. Such a little space. Okay. Let me go grab another 100 at 5%. We'll reattach that. Yep. And then we'll test this one, and we know this is the bad one. No, this is the good one. This is the bad one. Pop the lid off that. Let me go grab some parts. Here. My wife brought home Burger King for dinner, and I had a couple of chicken sandwiches. And they were so dry that a piece of the chicken got stuck in my throat. It's irritated the crap out of my throat. Okay, so this one transistor's got a gain of 7 left to it. We're not going to trust it. We're just going to grab 2 brand new HGs. This is the one that had the leaking issue on it. Yeah. We'll go throw this in the bag. Let's get this thing put back together. What do you guys think? Away we go. So before we go and slip this all back together, I want to cover this. Back in my day, my friend Kerry Went, aka Bouncer, he would have cut out a perfect cardboard template and then very carefully packing taped that in place underneath here as an insulator. Well, I'm opting to use the duct tape of the electrical world. It's called Kapton. It's a very fancy tape. It's got a really, really, really high voltage dielectric resistance. Those are fancy words that are meant to describe the fact that it doesn't conduct for shit. It also is very, very resistant to heat. So now, going forward, once I slide this back in here, we'll always have a layer of insulation between these solder joints and the heat sink. When we flip this over and I go to do the last little bit of repair, I got a couple of resistors I have to tie on here. And I don't want the solder to flow through because there's pass-through vias here. I don't want the solder to flow through and it drip and us have a big problem. This is what I call preventative issue. This is a preventative thing. So now we got to very carefully, while lifting up on the middle of the board, slide this up in here. But just want to show you, Kapton. It's good. It's good stuff. Okay. So let me explain a couple downfalls to this box. Ground. Ground is a horrible thing inside this amp. It is a passive thought, a wish and a desire and passive in all its ways. Let me prop this up a little differently. There we go. Okay. So this is the inside of your HG transistor. Let me get my pointing tool. Let's sit down and have a class here. This amplifier has ground that is provided through this center trace. And if we pan down, this is our ground. Okay? Okay. There is one trace that connects the top portion of this with the bottom portion of this. And it runs down the outside of the cabinet, down out here. We bring our ground in, we stub it here, up here. From there, it works its way over, hits the edge of the cabinet, and through pure, well, we'll say desire to have penetration into the heatsink. That's what Russian's mom said last night. They're penetrating into her. Anyhow, just the contact of the edge of the heatsink is what carries a lot of the ground current from A to B. And then we have these leads that are up here at the top that flow from the board to the heatsink. But down here on the transistor side of things, let's make a little observation on the 16D08 turd bucket. This is the best that we've got. So I can say turd bucket, but we'll notice that this tab and this tab are tied together by this shorting bar. This is the inside of a Toshiba. There is a dramatic more metal mass that connects this tab and this tab together. There's a bar that goes underneath here, right here, and another one that goes right here across the bottom. Significantly more metal mass going from the transistors from tab to tab. This trace here is ground. It doesn't physically connect to the case ground or back to the center ground in any way. None. This here has got our protection diode for our entire positive circuit. This here is our positive rail, and this here is our ground. This edge of this transistor has to carry the ground for this transistor to operate. So the transistors that are out here on this side of the chip, these transistors here, have to pull all their ground current from here through this transistor, across this tab, through this transistor, then to this trace, then back down underneath this little tiny trace that's thicker than a pencil, down to here. And then eventually loop its way over and find a case. The same thing's happening here. So all of the ground structure for the tuning of this transistor and the tuning of this transistor, i.e. this capacitor here and that capacitor there, finds their ground reference through the component. Now in the olden days, we've known this to be a problem since, well, I first started totally farting around with these things. Okay. What they did in later iterations is they made special eyelet tabs that went from the screws to here. So they'd have a little ring eyelet that went from here to here, from here to here, from here to here, from here to here. And it used the heat sink, which is going to carry a significantly more amount of current than any trace on this board ever could. Think about it. It's a denser, thicker material. It's anodized. It's got very low resistance. The problem is the hookup for everything is the edge of the cabinet. The Toshiba worked better in a lot of different environments simply because of its internal structure. Not the transistor chipset, but the way the transistor was completely assembled. This here is bullshit. This bar. This is your biggest point of failure on the 2879Cs, by the way, is this little bar. If we were to zoom in here real close, we'll see if we can get it to focus. Focus. Let's see here. How do I do manual focus? I don't remember anymore. Oh, auto manual. This little bar, there it is. This little bar on the 2879C is half the thickness of the 16D08. So you have to think that mathematically we're going to have ourselves a compromise. This 2879C has got two more chipsets on it. So what they've done is they've slipped this chip up and they slide this chip up. They put this one in the middle and then they put a third chip down here on the bottom. So a total of 6 chips. There's 4 on this thing. This little bar goes right over this tab. Well, this is your 12 volt and here's your ground. So if I was to take and cut this little bar in half, as far as thickness goes, what does that little shorting bar turn into? It turns into a fuse. So 2879C, when you put them underneath a heavy current load, It's like I tell these guys that are just starting out, hey, if you build with a 2879C box, first time you put a heavy dead key in it, turn the amp upside down. So at least when the heavy current load comes, this bar that crosses the top, and on some of the later generations of C, now what he started to do is he'll solder a little lead here and goes across the middle of the chipset. That'll come into play down the road. You guys will see. That's years down the road for what you guys are concerned with. That little bar turns into a fuse, and so it comes out of the factory, it's nice and straight. We put underneath the heavy load, is it going to bend this way when it comes underneath the load, or is it going to bend this way? And we pray to God that when it flexes up. That's why I assume, you know, you put a 16 transistor amplifier together, you turn it over on its lid, and then you put a heavy dead key through it. So then the current load on the transistor goes up, and the little bar, because of gravity, will bend up. No more problem. That's just one of the things that I don't like about this 2879C. If you notice, I don't use them here. I don't. I mean, if somebody was really, really, really super insistent that they had to have a 2879C box, after I got done laughing at them, I'd be like, okay, I'll special order the transistors just for you. And I'd put them in, and then I'd be like, you got no guarantee. No guarantee, no warranty, no nothing. They're just delicate. The new components that we've been working on now for like 2 years, we've had to address that issue in a couple different ways. That's another conversation for another day. What I have done is I've built copper grounding straps. Now what we could have done back in the day, what I would have done is I would have taken a solder wick and gone from here to here to here to here to here, and we would have been done. The problem is the solder wick actually acts as a sponge, and it holds heat to the top of the transistor. And before you know it, Bob's your uncle, you're burning up the pills because they're getting hot. Because now you put a metal mass across the top of this ceramic glass lid. That's really all this is. It's a man-made ceramic glass. And it'll cause the seals to fail on the transistor, and the lids will pop off. Of course, in the same breath, I've seen lids held down with solder wick that have been running for 20 years. This is my issue fixed. And then what we'll do is we'll bring the ground wire in here, and then we'll run another wire to right here in the center. And why we do that is because we want to make sure that we've got a good ground contact. Because remember, most of our electrons come from ground. Well, they all come from ground, they flow to positive, so. Okay, lesson over. Okay, so we've reached the tail end of the saga for this amplifier. All right. So what we had to do to get this to fully chooch. I'll turn the fan off. That's preamp. Turn the amp off. So we put new coax connectors in it, put a new balancing resistor in it, did power wire upgrades, snuck another one down here, down the side for the driver's section. We did a choke on the fan to the outside, put the fan through a grommet, put a new grommet in for the power wires, put new power wires in it, 2 new transistors, upgraded the ground bus distribution network. This is the tune for the input, this is the tune for the 4-pill section from the 1-pill. Yeah, it's freaking running. The only problem we got is the preamp relay is a little iffy, and I don't have another one of them preamp transistor, or pardon me, relays here. So we're just gonna run with it. There's Velcro on the bottom of this thing, so it sticks to the towel. Okay, here we go. Boomer Deluxe 600. Amp on. Preamp is working at the moment, so we're just going to run with it for right now. I'm telling you, all you gotta do is do a little tappy tap on that relay and it doesn't want to fully latch up. Okay, anyhow, got a 1,000 watt slug in peak, 1,000 in average, 5 watt slug in reverse, back from the Bird 10,000 watt dummy load. We're at 15 volts on the button. Amplifier off. Let's show you drive. at 012. Our whopping 25, 30 watts. Here's our pass-through tune at 01212. Not the greatest, not too bad. Okay, so first we're going to start out on low, amp on at 012, 450 watts. We're going to go to medium now at 012, about 550 at 012, about 580. Here's our input tune at 012, at 012, at 012. Not too bad. For a Palomar, that's really good. So, this thing is back to running. So 580 watts at 15 volts. Amp off. We got anything hot. We got our load resistors. And then our final tune capacitor. Everything else is ice cold. Don't see any amp draw on the amp meter. We're going to call this thing fixed. So slide the tin back on it. So now that we've got one done, there's another one here that we got to look at. He's really not interested in sinking a lot of money into this thing, the other one. And I'm like, cool, no problem. But we're going to take a look at it anyhow. So let's slide this one out of the way for the moment. This is a Palomar 450. Same brand of abortion going on here. Dirty coat hanger in an alley, I think. So that's all we got for fan leads. Of course, butchered power wire. I have hooked this up. It does work. Now let me see. What are the notes here? Palomar 450. No clue with this one. RX is good, but when I key up, I hear the relay respond, but then I also hear a scary buzzing sizzle sound. So we just shut her down. Many thanks for the assist to repair or optimize whatever you feel you have for optimum performance. Please confirm what the max TX PEP should be for this 450. Great appreciated, blah, 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 blah. Okay. This thing does work. Our combiners, these two resistors, these two balancing resistors at the final stage, have gotten very hot in their life. We're not going to go super overkill like we did the other one, even though this one shares a lot of the same problems. Well, same problems as all Palomar solid state boxes of this vintage. The ground is woefully, horribly inadequate in between the transistors, as we can all see. And yeah, it's just starving to death. I did hook this up and run it. It does not have any bias issues. If you ever have one of these come in your shop, keep your fingers away from this potentiometer, unless you know exactly what you're doing. Turning this up will not make the amplifier do any more watts. It will just cause the transistors to go pop, and they'll explode. So keep that in mind. No touchy touch unless you know how to measure the current for this setup. What I do need to do is I need to put a different power wire in this thing. This is horrible. So let's put a power wire in it. I want to test the RCA or the coax connectors. The one thing that really bugged me on this amp is the solder work here is scary at best. If you can see, that blob of solder coming off the pin is barely making connection, and it's almost making connection with the shield. So, at the end of the day, I think we're going to need new coax connectors on this. We need to check our solder work, and we got to make sure that there's nothing in here that's going to cause this thing to have a hard time. Got to hook our fan up too. So, okay, enough said. This one's going to be easy peasy and quick. The other one took a lot of, well, love. Special kind of love. Oh, and I just now noticed this. Oh, it's got a burnt resistor down here. Son of a gun. Well, the transmit relay is still working. All right, let's change power wires out and change out the coax connectors, and then we'll see what we get. Well, here we are at the end of this story. At least once in every YouTube video, I got to stop and say thanks for the Patreons here. If you've ever learned anything from this channel, you ever had the desire to try and help support the channel, please come join us on Patreon. You get access to all the videos at least 2 full days before they come out. I'm literally 2 weeks ahead now. So if you're watching this now, the guys on Patreon got to watch it like 2 weeks ago. It's no shit. They get previews of all the upcoming videos. They get to see what I'm working on every single day. They get access to behind the scenes content, and they have access to all the equipment that gets built here on this bench before it comes out to you guys in the public. So you might want to think about coming and joining us. Believe me when I tell you, I thank God for these guys, because there's the one that allowed me to go travel and do all the wonderful things I get to go do. Okay. The Palomar 450 here. All we had to do on this one was upgrade the power wires, fix the fan hookup, change out and put new coax connectors, and I think what was arcing was the output coax connector, because I went to pull on the wire and it literally just popped off and it was all burnt. So put brand new coax connectors on that new power wire, got it all hooked up, turned right on, fired right up, got the fan with a block on it now, so it's actually got a choke. So, needless to say, at the end of the day, all we gotta do is put some watts in it and it's gonna make power. Okay, let's go look at the bird meters here. So we're using a 955. This is a low drive amplifier, 35 watt radio, right? At 012. Running right at 15 volts. At 012. Or 25 watts worth of drive. Turn the amp on. Let's back out and reframe this. So we'll turn the amp on. And we're going to put her down on low, which I believe is that direction. It is labeled low. Okay. At 01212. Makes 300 watts worth of peak power. Let's go to medium. At 012. Makes 500 watts of power. It's already outperformed this number. So now we're going to go to high. At audio, 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 audio. Let's do sideband real quick, just because we can. At 12, 12, 12. Back to AM. At audio, 12, 12. Just check out, make sure our preamp's working. Preamp is working. We're done. Oh, yeah, last thing, input tune. It's not too horribly bad. Hello, hello, 1 2 1 2. Hello, 1 2 1 2. Remember, low drive radio. And that's with 18.5 feet of nulled out non-reactive coax. So that means that you're going to get an integer at 6.5 and another integer at 18, where you're not going to have any reactants in this 316. So it's not adding or subtracting or adding anything to the signal. It's going to be non-reactant. Okay. This thing is done. Its paired little partner in crime is also done. That's a cute little amp. We could get this one to do more. We'd have to change half the caps in the amp. Change that cap, that cap, that cap, and that cap. And we could probably get another 100 watts out of this box. But this thing's as bulletproof as we're going to be able to make it. It's fully repaired, this one here. This is bulletproof as we're going to be able to make it. It's fully repaired, this guy here. So on that note, I'm going to say, gentlemen, it's been fun. I've enjoyed this. It's time for me to pull this SD card out of the camera, stick it in the computer, and get on with editing. Big shout out to Penna, Excess Power, Siglant, Mechland, Bird, Coaxial Dynamics. And a big thanks to every single one of you guys. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Because believe me, I understand you don't have to watch this. You don't have to follow along. But you guys do, and I'm grateful for it. On that note, gentlemen, I'll see you. I appreciate every single one of you. Click, click.